Hi, everybody. I am taking this time to put together the week 2 wrap up video and then week 3 introduction video. Unfortunately, I'm doing this from the LAX International Terminal as I head out to Japan for the week. So please bear with any announcements that you hear behind me and any kind of white noise behind me. So in week 2, we finished up looking at the fourth and third millennia. Week two obviously focused on Egypt. Week 1 focused on the ancient Near East in general, and then Mesopotamia in the fourth and third millennia. We also looked at issues of comparative method, both textual and iconographic, and hopefully set the stage for the rest of the course. As I mentioned earlier, the way the course is designed is that the first 2 weeks cover the fourth and third millennia. Weeks 3 through 5 will cover the second millennium, and then weeks 6 through 10 will cover the first millennium. So we're getting closer to the biblical period, the time of ancient Israel. As you can tell, that there's a development within the ancient Near East from kind of cities and city-states to larger regional powers, which is what we'll get into in the second millennium, and then toward what we would consider as international empires in the ancient Near East, which is what we see really in the first millennium. One of the things that I want to briefly just discuss is iconographic method. And as you saw in the video and in the readings, studying ancient Near Eastern art imagery or iconography is much like studying a text. In fact, one needs to learn how to read an ancient image, much like one needs to learn how to read a text. The basic iconographic method is as such. You begin with detailed reading, detailed analysis of an image. You look at shape and form and just simply identify what it is that you see in front of you. And then you move on to identification of the image. And then from there, you move on to the interpretation of the meaning of the image or the meaning of the scene. And again, in many ways parallels the way in which one reads a text. From the detailed grammatical analysis to which includes phonology and morphology, to interpreting words, to interpreting clauses, to interpreting paragraphs, and then moving on toward more complex forms of interpretation and analysis, such as literary criticism, rhetorical criticism, etc. But I hope what you've also seen is the importance of understanding ancient Near Eastern iconography and the ways in which it can benefit reading even a text. The text is very visual. There's a lot of metaphor and imagery found in ancient Near Eastern texts, including the Old Testament or First Testament. So I hope it's been at least initially beneficial for you, and I think that you'll find your eyes have now in many ways been opened to a whole new world and a whole new means of accessing the First Testament. In terms of the discussion for week 2, I'm very, very pleased. There's a lot of very good back and forth and a lot of good engagement. The week 2 discussion was of course focused on the Genesis 1 and 2 and its relationship to the Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish, which is really focused not necessarily on creation per se, but it's really focused on Marduk. There's a larger context for the Babylonian creation epic, much like there's a larger context for Genesis 1 and 2. It's not really about creation, it's set within a larger story. Now, one of the things that I do want to bring up in terms of our discussions is I want to encourage you to consider the discussions and the prompts thought exercises. You may or may not have the same perspective on the way that a text is interpreted. You may or may not agree with a particular approach or a particular comparison that's being drawn, and certainly that's fine. But what I want you to do is engage the prompt and the discussion as if you did in some cases. In some cases, I ask you, if something is true, then what are the implications? And so I want you to explore the if. If something, doesn't necessarily mean it is, but I do want you to work on using these prompts as a thought exercise to explore those ifs. And don't feel that there's a need to defend the Bible against any particular comparison or against any particular context. The Bible does not need defense. And through these discussions and even your comparative assignments, what I'm trying to do is build your comparative muscles and then critical thinking skills. If we're going to engage in contemporary discussion, we have to be able to take a step back and ask the what ifs. We have to be able to deconstruct even our own arguments and positions, and place ourselves in the shoes and be empathetic toward the ways in which other people think. And so even these exercises focused on ancient Near Eastern texts and their relationship to the Old Testament provides a skill that is often lacking in today's contemporary discourse. And so there is a payoff. And so again, week 2 we finished up the 4th and 3rd millennia. We're going to be moving into an era in which that is more connected with the biblical text. And so again, thank you for your engagement the last 2 weeks. I want to cover a few administrative things before I move into introducing week 3. One of them it relates to the announcements. I hope that everybody is enjoying the announcements that I'm posting. Hopefully it's not too burdensome or doesn't clog up your inbox at all. But don't feel that you have to do anything with the announcements. The announcements are not assignments. I'm not asking you to write essays or comment on them. My goal is that you engage them, follow the links, read the material that I post or watch the videos, etc. Be informed and entertained. My goal is to bring recent research that I come across or that I'm introduced to you guys, to show you that there is a flourishing scholarly world out there, and in many ways that engages the kind of popular discourse. And so I hope you find the announcements enjoyable. I also want to encourage you to post any and all questions that you have about the course in the general course question forum, which is accessible through the main course page. Nobody's posted any questions. I get a lot of questions via email, but I want everyone to benefit from the questions and answers that come through those discussions. Another thing I also want to reinforce is you don't have to do every single one of the comparative assignments. The task is to accomplish 7 of the 9 comparative assignments. And so if you have to travel or if you're having a tough week, feel free to take one of those weeks off. Let me know so that I'm not awaiting your submission. But please, again, understand that you don't have to accomplish all 9 comparative assignments. I will not give extra credit for you doing all 9. You can, if you want more practice, I'll certainly grade it and comment on them, but you're not going to get additional credit. And then in terms of PlayPosit, I do want to comment on the fact that PlayPosit's not a perfect system. However, it's the only method that I have found that allows me to post a video, easily embed questions, and hold students accountable for watching the videos. One of the things that I found, and one of the reasons why I began to use PlayPosit in the first place, was because I would post videos on YouTube or Canvas, and by week 3, let's say 20% of the students would watch a video. It's one of the things that is easily forgotten about or avoided by students in online courses. So PlayPosit's it's a good method. It's good enough for a course. Certainly not perfect, and I apologize for any confusion the first week or so when, and I'll explain what happened. I created, I've taught this course before. I had a course previously set up with all the videos still there. And then when I introduced to the new course on PlayPosit, it brought me to a beta version of PlayPosit. And so my videos for this course were in the beta version. Unfortunately, the link that I gave you took you to the original version of PlayPosit. And so there was some discontinuity. So hopefully everything's figured out and you guys are able to access the videos that I post there. Now let me introduce week 3. So week 3, we're moving into the second millennium. And as you'll come to find out, there's much more, let's say, connection between the second millennium and the biblical text. In fact, in many ways, the second millennium is the kind of setting in which some of the stories of Genesis are depicted. So the Abraham cycle, Isaac, Jacob, those seem to be set, even the Exodus narrative, seem to be set in the second millennium, somewhere between the first half to the latter portion of the second millennium. And we're going to encounter some aspects of the second millennium that do seem to have some connection, at least from a historical memory or cultural memory perspective, with the biblical text. For example, we're going to come across the Hyksos. And in many ways, you'll see some relationship between the Hyksos and even the Joseph narrative. We have a Semitic people who migrate to Egypt, they rise to power, and then ultimately are expelled forcefully from Egypt back toward the area of Canaan. In Mesopotamia, the first half of the second millennium, we see a number of city-states competing for power. Unfortunately, there's no kind of one primary state that is the main power or hegemony in Mesopotamia. In fact, a letter from Mari states as such: no king is truly powerful on his own. 10 to 15 kings follow Hammurabi of Babylon, Rimsin of Larsa, Ibul-Pil of Eshnuna, or Amut-Pil of Katna. But 20 kings follow Yoram-Lin of Yamkad. And so this letter sums up the political situation in the first half of the second millennium. As Vandermeer states, this is a time of continual political fragmentation and centralization. It's also a time of significant literary production, and a period in which several great kings dominate the ancient Near East for short periods of time. Hammurabi, who's at this point in time most famous for his law code, is the most well-known ruler in Mesopotamia of this period. And so there's a lot of interesting things that happen here in the second millennium. It's certainly impossible to cover it all. And so, again, this course is an introduction to the ancient Near East. There's, again, a lot of regional powers, Egypt being one of those regional powers, Babylonia and various other city-states in Mesopotamia. Another significant thing that we come across are the law collections. Now, Hammurabi's law code is not the earliest law code. In fact, one of the earliest law codes that we have are the laws of Ur-Nama, which date to the late 3rd millennium BC, and those are in Sumerian. There's also the laws of Lipit Ishtar, which date to the early 2nd millennium. Those are also in Sumerian. The laws of Eshnuna date to around 1700 BC. That's in Akkadian. There's also Hittite laws, additional Sumerian and Babylonian laws. There are Assyrian laws, also in Akkadian. And then, of course, there's the biblical law collections. In fact, there's more than a few groupings of biblical laws. The comparative assignments this week are going to focus on the flood narratives and law collections. What we'll see is, again, just like law collections, there are numerous flood myths out there, or flood narratives out there. Gilgamesh is one of them, and Gilgamesh even adapts the story of Atrahasis. There are other Sumerian tablets out there. In fact, one of the stories which was recently published just within the past 4 or 5 years by a scholar at the British Museum. This very, very small fragment mentions animals coming on and leaving the ark 2 by 2, which again parallels the biblical story. What we're also going to find is, and I posted a handout in the week 3 course page, is that we even have 2 biblical flood stories. They're similar in their overarching scope, but they're different in the ways that they describe the story. There's differences in details, the number of animals that Noah brings onto the ark, the ways in which the wickedness or sin of humanity is described. You'll see that there's a lot of redundancy, a lot of repetition, and these break down into the 2 main literary strands that we find running throughout Genesis. And you'll also see some connections between one or the other of the biblical strands and the other ancient Near Eastern flood narratives that are out there. I encourage you to, again, ask any questions. I'm very, very pleased with your engagement in the course. I think the course is going very, very well right now, and I look forward to seeing how you guys do in week 3. Please let me know if you have any questions.